Good evening and welcome. Seeking to keep the federal election interference case against Donald Trump alive, special counsel Jack Smith has laid out a 165-page legal argument that Mr. Trump's actions to overturn the 2020 election results were those of a private candidate for president and unrelated to his job. Smith, in a court filing unsealed today, says Trump resorted to crimes to try to stay in office after his loss, launching increasingly desperate plans to overturn the legitimate election results in 7 states. Smith is trying to find a path that complies with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that Mr. Trump has limited immunity for actions taken in his official capacity as president. Smith providing newly heard evidence in the case, including conversations between the then president and his vice president, Mike Pence, in which Pence urged him to abandon his quest to try and stay in office. Tonight, Donald Trump posting online calling the case unconstitutional and a witch hunt. Ken Dilanian has late developments.
Tonight, special counsel Jack Smith fighting to keep the January 6th case against Donald Trump alive. In a new filing with new evidence, Smith tailoring his criminal case to survive the Supreme Court's ruling that presidents can't be prosecuted for carrying out official acts. Writing that although Trump was president during the charged conspiracies, his scheme was a fundamentally private one. Smith also laying out new details about Trump's conduct and conversations in the days and hours before his supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021. After Trump began claiming fraud even as votes were still being counted, the special counsel quotes a Trump aide as saying, "Make them riot." But the bulk of new revelations involve Trump's alleged interactions with Vice President Mike Pence, based on 5 pages of notes by the vice president. The special counsel saying Pence gradually and gently tried to convince the defendant to accept the lawful results of the election, including a private lunch in December where Pence encouraged Trump not to look at the election as a loss, just an intermission. Smith arguing Trump and Pence were political running mates discussing private acts, not office holders contemplating official ones. After Pence decided not to stop the certification and Trump denounced him in a tweet, Smith recounts aides allegedly telling Trump that Pence was in danger. As Trump sat in a White House dining room watching the Capitol riot on TV, Smith wrote, an aide told him Pence had been rushed to a secure location. Smith says Trump looked at the aide and said only, "So what?" In a statement, a Trump campaign spokesman called the filing falsehood-ridden, unconstitutional, and another obvious attempt by the Harris-Biden regime to undermine American democracy and interfere in this election, adding the case should be dismissed.
And Ken, we've been down this road in another context and another time, but doesn't the Justice Department typically avoid taking action related to candidates this close to an election?
Yeah, that is absolutely their policy, Lester. And in fact, the DOJ has now entered what they call the quiet period, where prosecutors avoid announcing anything that they think could influence voters. But it was the judge, not the special counsel, who made this filing public, Lester.
All right, Ken Dilanian starting us off. Thanks. Let me bring in Garrett Haake now, who's covering the Trump campaign. Garrett, with early voting already underway in many states, the question being asked tonight, could this impact the race?
Well, Lester, the conduct described in this filing has already led Donald Trump to being impeached and to that months-long blockbuster congressional investigation. It's hard to imagine that the new details here alone revealed could shift the opinion of voters about an issue that has been so thoroughly publicly vetted already. But all of the polling shows this is going to be an incredibly close race right to the end. And relitigating such a divisive chapter in the Trump presidency is certainly not the way the Trump campaign wants to be closing out this race. Lester?
Okay, Garrett Haake, thank you. Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.